This episode is sponsored by Linode. Linode is offering listeners of this podcast a $20 credit, which is good for 4 free months at their lowest plan. Their plans start at 1 gigabyte of RAM for $5 a month. You can get your servers in any of their 10 data centers, and their high memory plans start at 16 gigabytes. Get a server running in under a minute. They do hourly billing with a monthly cap on all plans and add-on services like backups, node balancers, Longview, etc. VMs for full control, running Docker containers, encrypted disks, VPNs, etc. You can run a private Git server. They provide native SSD storage, 200 gigabit network, and Intel E5 processors. They have 24/7 friendly support, even on holidays, and a 7-day money-back guaranteed. So go check them out at linode.com/JavaScriptJabber. Hey everybody, and welcome to another episode of My JavaScript Story. This week we're talking to Ben Coe from NPM. Ben, do you want to say hi?
Hey, how's it going? I'm excited to be on the show. I had a lot of fun being on JavaScript Jabber last time, so excited to do this.
Yeah, you were on a while ago. I'm trying to remember how far back it was actually. But yeah, JavaScript Jabber, we talked about NPM. Let me look that up real quick. But yeah, looks like it was September 2014. So,
yeah, that was, wow, it doesn't feel that long. I guess it's been busy.
Yeah, time flies. Yeah, but we had you and Forrest and Rebecca and Isaac on talking about NPM. And I think, if I remember right, that was about the time when NPM Inc. was formed and NPM kind of changed the way that it was structured and stuff like that. So,
yeah, I was the third employee at the time, and the company had just formed, and we were just starting to get our first product built, and it was a really fun time. So I forget. I think we probably talked to you about some of our early products, I imagine, which were probably in their very early stages then.
Yeah, and since then, I mean, we've had Isaac back, we've had Rebecca back, talked to a few other people involved in Node. We've had Michael Rogers on a few times. So it's fun and exciting to get people in and just see what's going on, what's new in the community, and then also just to get to know people who are working on this stuff. I think in a lot of cases, especially with tools like NPM, it sort of becomes this tool that we use and we don't really think about the people behind it. And so that's part of the reason why I've been doing a show like this, is just that I want to show, hey, look, there are real people behind it. Here's who they are. And look, they're not that different from you. You got into programming the same way they did. So
cool. I'm definitely excited to tell that story because I think it's kind of fun.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, let's just dive in then. How did you get into programming?
So I was always really excited by computers, even from a pretty young age. But my stepfather was fixed hardware at the University of Waterloo, and he would bring me home like the decommissioned old hardware from Waterloo. So I'd get these in the early 90s, I'd get an XT computer that was no longer being used by any professors at Waterloo, and I'd get to noodle around on it. So that was how I got into, learning how to use computers and hardware and the operating systems. But I didn't quite, I knew I wanted to learn how to program, but I didn't quite know how to get started. And then I think what was really a turning point for me was finding GeoCities one summer. I think I was in grade 7 or 8. And I found this GeoCities, like, I can have a website on the internet just by making this website on this GeoCities service. And I remember seeing, like, at the time, there wasn't anything like NPM. But people would share these little snippets of JavaScript all over their personal site. So you'd find and JavaScript wasn't a serious business thing back then. It was more like you'd have like this little message board for your website, and you would put googly eyes on it that follow your mouse around or something. But then people would share those snippets of code. And then you could learn, if I change this parameter, the eyes look slightly different, or if I change that parameter, this will happen. So I didn't really think of it as programming, but I was definitely starting I basically put as many random things like that on my horrible early website as I could. And then eventually, I didn't really have internet access that often when I was that age. I was, 11 or 12, and was in a really small town and didn't really know anyone else who programmed. So what I used to do would be go down to the Radio Shack, which was downtown, and I'd just raid the bargain textbook bin that they had at the Radio Shack. And I bought these books that started to teach me programming, which I think was when I started to learn it a little bit better. So I had JavaScript for Dummies. I got this really old one, and I got a book on a really early version of HTML, and I got an early C textbook too. So that's when I really started to fall in love with programming, was when I got a few of those textbooks and would just read them by myself on long Canadian winters. I think living in a cold country is a good way to learn programming, because you spend way too much time in your bedroom when.
Oh, there you go. Yeah.
Yeah. So that's definitely how I got started. My stepfather was a really good mentor for learning about the hardware and getting off the ground with that stuff.
That makes sense. Yeah, I remember GeoCities was kind of where I got started too. I must be a little bit older than you, because I was in high school when I got into doing that kind of stuff. But yeah, a lot of the same things, copying and pasting plenty of JavaScript in there and figuring out how to structure web pages and stuff like that. Back when you laid everything out with tables.
Yeah, it's funny because JavaScript wasn't very well respected back then.
No.
It was like people would usually have it turned off in the browser, so it's not something you'd use to actually make a serious website, right? It was kind of more of a hobbyist thing.
Yep, and more websites are now becoming almost completely built and rendered by JavaScript. So it's definitely a different world now. How did you wind up getting into JavaScript then? Because I remember back then, and even when I got into development professionally, I started out doing Ruby on Rails, and JavaScript was kind of just a necessary evil where you'd use jQuery to get the bare minimum done you needed in the browser. So
yeah, it's definitely like I did it early on with my GeoCities kind of websites I did, and then I kind of put it down and went to college and learned Java and C and all those languages that you think of as real programming languages. Mm-hmm. Then when I got my first job outside of college, I was fortunate and ended up at this company in Toronto called Freshbooks, which was this invoicing application, and they had a really interactive invoice experience that used a lot of JavaScript. So when I started at Freshbooks, I had a couple of really great mentors who started teaching me kind of what was being done in JavaScript at that time, and I started learning on this mainly the invoice experience when you'd add new features to the invoice. So I had a couple of really good mentors at Freshbooks, and I started to take the language more seriously then. And I went to jQuery conference back when that was kind of the conference you'd go to in JavaScript, and mm-hmm. Found that really exciting. There's just a ton of amazing stuff happening at the time.
That's really cool. And FreshBooks is something I've both used, and they've sponsored the show in the past. You may hear ads for FreshBooks on some of the shows. Yeah. But that's an affiliate relationship at this point. But yeah, interesting stuff. And, a lot of these companies started to do it. I remember early on in my career, in fact, my first job, one of my coworkers was doing a lot in sort of animating and building out interactive features with jQuery. And nobody was really doing it, back 2004, 2005. And a lot of that has changed now. But yeah.
It was interesting. It was still like FreshBooks was at the point where, there was a few little frameworks, like I think Dojo was a thing,
mm-hmm.
and so there were a few things, but for the most part, it was pretty bespoke. But I mean, it used some of the conventions that have now become, part of a framework like Angular or React, but it was very bespoke. But so you've kind of seen that happen over the past 9 years, which has been cool to watch it become what it has become.
Yeah, it's been really interesting to see where things have gone. And then now you have the whole debate of how much of it do you do in JavaScript? How much of it do you need to build into a framework like Angular, React, or Vue versus, I'm just going to keep using jQuery and have the page reload all or part of it, and that's okay with me.
Yeah, it's kind of funny. I'm in this weird world of JavaScript where I actually haven't. I was basically hired as a backend infrastructure JavaScript person at NPM, so I'm starting to learn some of the new stuff like React and whatnot. But I've actually been not involved enough to have that much of an opinion.
Uh-huh.
Which I miss it, so I'm hoping to learn React's what I'm kind of excited to learn right now, which I've been starting to pick up more.
Yeah, we're working on launching a React podcast here, so I'll just go ahead and plug that. There should be a link to the Indiegogo campaign as this is released. So yeah, go support the podcast if you're interested in that. I'm curious, how did you wind up working for NPM then?
Yeah, so I'd been, it kind of grows out of FreshBooks again. I was sent to that first jQuery conference with a coworker, Mark Story, who's actually, been the lead developer of Cake PHP for years and years and years. And him and I were sent to that jQuery conference, and I was like, man, there's so much really exciting stuff happening in JavaScript. Like at that conference, there was people making isometric games and just these great kind of emergent UI frameworks and stuff. And after the conference, I remember I was just chatting with Mark, and I was like, man, wouldn't it be cool if you could do some of this stuff on the back end? Like, I wish that I didn't have to write PHP on a day-to-day basis. And I wish I could take these JavaScript skills and do back-end stuff. And Mark said, oh, there's this new little thing called Node.js that just came out. That's like, I think at the time it was like 0.04 release or something. And so I immediately kind of installed it out of curiosity. And then weekends when I was programming, I started programming Node as my kind of weekend open source hacking toy. And then, was at FreshBooks for a couple more years, moved to the Bay Area, did my own company, but was always doing Node on the side. And then when I saw that NPM had formed a company, I was like, man, there's actually I could actually go work at a company that's, doing this stuff full time and lets me take my ops skills, because they were hiring a operations person, which is how I started at NPM. So gave me this opportunity. Gave me the opportunity to take the ops skills I'd learned, doing my own company, like Linux administrative stuff, but also take the Node stuff I'd been doing for fun in my spare time and combine them into a job. And so it was kind of a dream job for me, and I was lucky enough that I got through the interview process. That was the first couple of weeks of the company, so they were literally kind of on fire, because it was like around the time that NPM had gone down for a week, and there was a lot of ops issues, and I think they were I was very fortunate. I applied at a good time because they really wanted someone who had ops experience to help our now CTO CJ solve some of the ops problems. And so I got in the door, and then more and more I've gotten to do. I gradually had more of a DevOps role where I was doing more development and less ops over time. But yeah, that's how I ended up applying.
Nice. Yeah, I remember there was some angst. I mean, we went through the whole thing with IOJS, and then that eventually merged back to Node, and then there was concern over, hosting of NPM. I'm trying to remember the name of the company that was hosting the registry.
Node.jitsu, I believe.
Yeah. Yeah. And so, people were like, okay, well, we appreciate what they're doing, but, it also sounded like they, it was costing them more and more to host it. And there were all these issues, and you can go back and listen to the episode if you're really curious about all of the things that went into this. But yeah, it was really interesting then to see it. Okay, we're going to come out as a company, and we're going to provide some for-profit options for people. And I don't know. I mean, a lot of people kind of get leery when there's money involved with open source. But it was also interesting just to see it from the standpoint of, well, a lot of times you get these corporate sponsors of open source projects, and then that winds up sort of dominating the cycle on that. So it was an interesting experiment just to watch from the outside and say, okay, how are they going to make this work? And, what are the long-term effects of that? Yeah.
I think it's kind of interesting to hear. Isaac's been talking to us recently about his thinking on this as the company grows. And I mean, one of the things was that NPM's, if you look at the graphs of just JavaScript usage over the past few years, like it's all been exponential.
Mm-hmm.
So like if you're in a foundation, or if you're relying on a single corporate sponsor or what have you, it kind of means every year you have to go to them and say, well, you gave us $250,000 last year to run the registry, but we actually need $750,000 this year because it's now 8 times bigger than it was in a 1 year period, right? And so it's definitely, it's certainly an experiment. It's there haven't been that many companies founded around the way NPM was founded around this open source product, but I think I can see where I think Isaac came to a good decision to do that, because we'd be in a position where we would have to ask for a lot of money at this point just to keep the registry running.
Yep. So what was it like being there early days? I mean, you were there, things are kind of coming together, the Node registry went down, and they were like, panic, let's get somebody in here to help. So you get in there. I mean, what was it like?
I came in a week or two. I came in a week or two after CJ, our now CTO, had been hired, and she was already had us really on a great track to just getting stuff stable. Like it was kind of like there was a lot of. I came in. I was definitely like I stood up our Nagios server, which has been up for years now, to actually start monitoring stuff more closely. But we already knew we wanted better monitoring, and we knew we wanted to automate more stuff. And it was actually for us early stage startup. There were 5 of us at the time. It was pretty low stress, a lot of fun. It was a lot of fun trying to get stuff stable, because it was kind of, for a lot of us, it was our second or third time doing this, and we kind of like, okay, we kind of had a game plan of how we wanted to automate stuff, a game plan of how we wanted to monitor stuff. Definitely the first 6 months, it was like I'd have my pager going off at 2 a.m. quite a bit. You'd wake up and be like, crap, some part of NPM's failing, and I have to poke at a server at 1 a.m. or something.
That's always fun, yeah.
But because it was our, CJ's very experienced, and I'd been through this myself with my own company, just coming out of that experience, like we were, at least had a process around NPM ops that was, if we have a problem that wakes us up at 2 a.m, let's never have that happen again. So it actually within not too many months of work, it became mostly just a lot of fun, because we were just at the center of the JavaScript community as you say, as kind of the whole IOJS thing happened, and as JavaScript just exploded over the past few years, right? Mm-hmm. So a lot of fun. Kind of flew by.
So over the last 3 years now, what contributions have you made to NPM and to the JavaScript community in general that you're excited about or want to talk about?
Yeah, sure. I mean, in terms of in my spare time, I've been writing this library called Yargs for years now. I actually inherited it from someone else, but I've been running development on it, which is a command line argument parser. So that's an open source library I'm really proud of. And I also wrote this open source library with Isaac called NYC, which is for test coverage. And I've been working on that for a few years. And gradually, in the process of doing that, I've been doing a lot of the work on Istanbul, which is a test coverage library as well. Uh-huh. So I've done a lot of work I'd say in my kind of wearing my open source contributor hat, I've done a lot of work around developer tooling and testing, and I'm proud of some of the libraries that have come out of that. In terms of what I've contributed to the JavaScript community and my work at NPM, I'm definitely really proud of how, working along with CJ, we managed to stabilize the registry to the point where like early on when I was starting at NPM, there was just this ongoing joke about the registry being down, because we'd just come out of we'd come out of this period where the registry was down a lot. And I'd say over the past 3-4 years, it's just gotten to the point where the registry, people kind of ignore there is still politics. There's always open source politics around something happening, but there's no longer this ongoing joke about NPM being down. It's just seen as this commodity that is available to people. And now we're on to these second order problems where, it's we now have 20,000 dependencies in our library. How can we shrink the number of dependencies, or how can we, it's a different set of problems. Yeah. So I'm proud I'm proud that we as a company and me and my peers managed to get it to that second order of problems.
Well, that's awesome. And it reminds me a little bit of the fail well with Twitter, where that was a very common thing for a while, and then you got used to you got used to it being down, and then all of a sudden it stabilized, and and you worked all that out, and it's such an integral part of things that when it doesn't work, it really hurts, and when it does work, I think a lot of times people just kind of don't really notice because it's doing what we expect it to do.
Yeah. No, definitely. And we're trying to, that's kind of an ongoing theme for us. NPM is a company. We sell products. We definitely are. Some people do think of us, I think, as you just turn on the socket and you get NPM. But we're trying to balance we want the number one priority for the company is that the registry exists forever and is always online. And then the number two priority is we want to find a way to be profitable so that that can always continue to be the case. So that's I've recently become my role at NPM now is actually product manager recently. So I've been helping develop some of our next generation products that are going to help make that goal come true. So it's a fun balance, but like you say, it's like people don't necessarily even think of what's happening when they type npm install, and we're trying to continue to let you be able to ignore npm install while offering you great additions to the npm experience, so that you do think of us sometimes, because we're making your work life even better. So
yeah, makes sense. So what are you working on now? You mentioned you're doing project management, but is that all of it? In particular areas of npm? Are there other things you're working on?
Yeah, I'd love to. I'd love to talk about some of the stuff I'm working on at npm, but also happy to talk about some of the stuff I've been working on myself.
Mm-hmm.
Start with my own stuff. So I don't know. Have you heard of Istanbul before yourself? Have you?
I have. I don't remember details, but yeah. I've heard it mentioned.
Basically, what it does is that if you're writing unit tests for your library, you can use Istanbul to instrument your tests such that when you run your test suite, you know which lines of your library have been interacted with.
Uh-huh.
So as someone rating tests and kind of build an application, whether there's bits of your code you should be pretty weary of because they aren't being exercised by your test suite. So you should probably write some tests for them, basically. So it tells you parts of your system you haven't tested too well, and helps you in turn move towards kind of 100% test coverage, where you would be able to be pretty confident you're at least exercising your whole code base, which is great for open source, because if someone's submitting a patch, you can tell that person in the code review process, like, it looks like this drops us below 100% coverage. Do you mind adding a couple tests for this new feature? So it's just really great in the open source world. Also really good in when you're writing software inside a company, to make sure that you're not leaving too much cruft around your applications. So what I've been doing recently that I'm really excited about is Jacob Gruber, who's works on the Chromium project. Actually did this really cool thing where he figured out how to add test coverage into the V8 JavaScript engine itself, rather than so it actually happens at the bytecode level in the V8 engine, and can actually tell you which lines of your JavaScript code have executed. So I've been working with him a little bit to basically make this library called C8, which would allow you to run your JavaScript application, see if it has good test coverage, but it's not actually doing anything it's not doing anything to your code to change it to count test coverage. It's actually just turning on this feature in the V8 engine, which I think is really neat. So I think it will be the way people do test coverage in the future for the folks who care about that sort of thing.
Nice. So is Istanbul going to go away then, or?
I think we'll probably. I mean, Istanbul has kind of, like a lot of big open source projects, has become a suite of open source things. Basically, there's the instrumenter bit, there's the thing that actually runs it. So I'm kind of picturing we'll probably use the Istanbul organization, but probably release this thing as release something that uses V8 directly, which I think will make my life much easier, because as we know, over the past few years with JavaScript, the language has changed a lot. There's a lot more of new language constructs, and like month by month, TC39 introduces all these new features to it. So instrumenting at the actual JavaScript engine layer rather than trying to do it post hoc is a lot easier. So I'm excited for that. I'm excited. I'm at NPM right now. What I'm really excited about is the first product I actually built at NPM was NPM Enterprise, which is basically, if you're a big company, you can run your own copy of NPM inside of your infrastructure. So if you care a lot about provenance and you don't want to use the public registry for your private stuff, you can run this NPM Enterprise appliance. We're actually working on kind of the next generation of NPM Enterprise right now, which is it's going to be very similar, but it's going to remove some of the burden of administration from hopefully you won't have to have an internal ops team to run it anymore. And it's also going to move the NPM Enterprise product, so it's much closer actually to the npmjs.com experience. So you have the exact same feature set just running for your corporation. Whereas there is a little bit of deviation between the two products right now as they stand. So,
Awesome.
I'm really excited about that.
Yeah, we should get you on JavaScript Jabber to talk about some of your test coverage work. I think that would be really fun.
Yeah, no, I'd love to. Like, it's something I've just been. I don't know. I used to think it was very pedantic and boring, and then I realized just how much it made me write much better software. It makes me refactor software better. So it's something I care about.
Yeah, absolutely. So what do you have coming down the pike next? I mean, you're talking about your work on these testing tools. You're talking about things with NPM. Do you want to give us some sneak preview as to what should be coming in NPM, or should I bug Isaac about that?
I think you should probably bug Isaac a little bit about that, because I don't want to. We have some deadlines we want to hit for releasing some of this stuff, and I just want to make sure I don't talk about anything prematurely.
Right. No, that makes sense. I think we had some folks on from NPM back in June. We talked to Rebecca Turner and just dug into what was new in the CLI and stuff. But it'd be interesting to see, some of these other changes in the registry and stuff like that. So
we have there's a lot of it. There's a lot of legitimately exciting stuff happening right now. It's about to go to public alpha beta. So I think I can say we're actually working on a React version of our website, which I think both is going to be a much nicer, kind of more modern looking version of the website. And at the same time is, I think, aligning us closer with what the community is currently doing with JavaScript. So, from a product point of view, it's going to let us better dog food what the community is currently doing so that we can then make NPM better at doing it. Mm-hmm. So that's going to be really exciting. And I think we have that in alpha now. So if anyone wants to reach out to Isaac or just the NPM bot on Twitter, like, we can definitely get more people into the alpha version of that.
That sounds great. One other thing that I'm kind of curious about, as you work on a lot of these different tools and, you're doing some project management now on NPM. How much of a read do you folks get over there on where the JavaScript community is going? I think, you have a bunch of historical data. Does that inform where you think things are going to wind up?
No, it's really interesting. I mean, it's hard to. I mean, we definitely, as a company, I think, want to try to be somewhat agnostic of some things. Like, you don't want to say, like, oh, you have to use this framework because this is going to be the future. Because we've seen a few times in the company's history, like, when the company started, just people were predominantly for front-end coding using Backbone was the main thing that had come on to. I believe Backbone was the main thing that was on the registry at the time as front-end frameworks go, and jQuery hadn't yet made the move onto the registry. I don't know if React was a thing then. It wasn't a huge thing yet. And then as we saw, over the past 4 years, we've seen various frameworks make the move onto the NPM registry, and then various ebbs and flows in which are the most popular. Laurie, our COO, did a great analysis of the different communities currently on NPM. I'm not going to kind of badly paraphrase his talk, but he's done some research on it. We are trying to, so you can see the trends in the registry. At the same, and we're not, there's certain things we don't want to pick a horse in the race on. I think,
right.
But at the same time, we do want to lead the future of JavaScript. So we do have. We have someone on TC39 an hour who's at least sitting in on the TC39 meetings to try to keep stride with where the language is going. We are starting to make some more contributions to the Node platform itself. We definitely do have a horse in the race where ESM modules are concerned, because that's going to be as people start to change how they write modules, that's really important to the NPM ecosystem. Mm-hmm. So that's something we care a lot about. So I think expect us to have opinions on that.
Right. Yeah, we did an interview with John David Dalton about that, the ESM module loader. So yeah, we're at this really exciting transition point, right? Where the interesting thing is you have these 600,000, you have this corpus of 600,000 modules that are already on NPM. And then you have also, but we're at this turning point as a community where we want to bring the browser and the existing CommonJS ecosystem closer together. So it's going to be interesting 6 months or a year while that happens. Yep. Sounds good. Well, I won't pepper you with too many more questions about NPM. In fact, let's go ahead and do some picks.
Do you run your own freelance business? Or maybe you're thinking about picking up some business on the side?
Well, then you need FreshBooks. FreshBooks is the quickest and easiest way to get invoices out to your clients. It's easy to use. It works anywhere, available from any device on the desktop, iPhone, iPad, Android, and all of your data is backed up and secure. And it makes it really easy to get organized and get paid. You'll be tracking time, logging expenses, and invoicing your clients in no time. You can also save time billing, freeing up several days per month to focus on the work that you love, and you get paid faster. FreshBooks customers are paid on average 5 days faster because there's a link on the invoice that says pay me now. And it's a great way to grow your business. Plus, FreshBooks is offering a 30-day trial. That's right, 30-day trial if you try them out. So go to gofreshbooks.com/devchat and enter devchat in the How Did You Hear About Us section. Once again, for a 30-day trial, go to gofreshbooks.com/devchat and enter devchat in the How Did You Hear About Us section. Do you have some things that you want to shout out about?
Yeah, sure. So this February, I'm going to this kind of hackathon conference thing in Illinois again called hackillinois.org, or Hack Illinois. And I think it's really cool because what they did last year is they brought in some open source maintainers from fairly popular projects. And then, so it's not just a hackathon where you make some company over a 2-day period or something. It's actually the students at the University of Champaign-Urbana are actually paired off with well-known developers from the open source community. Like last year, I was there with Blaine from Gulp and the fellow who writes a lot of Express. Jongleberry is his NPM name. And so we were actually pairing off with students and helping them land their first issues on open source projects. And it was just a lot of fun. And I think that's really cool to teach university students kind of open source, which is something I didn't learn until much later in life. Trying to think of what else do I want to call out? I definitely want to call out that C8 tool I've been working on, but more specifically, I want to call out the work that the Chromium people have been doing on test coverage, because I think it's really neat. I know he has a blog post coming out on that soon. I don't have too many other picks that come to mind right now.
Awesome. Well, those are cool. We'll definitely put links to those in the show notes and help people go check those out. I'm trying to figure out what I'm going to pick because I've already done a couple of these interviews today and I'm running low on what to pick. I mean, one thing that I picked up recently again is just recording videos, and so I've been using ScreenFlow, and I'm just going to shout out about that. I've been really liking that. And then, so one other thing that I'm going to pick, and this is something that my wife got into, and she bought a whole bunch of crap on it. And anyway, then I got on it, and I bought a whole bunch of crap on it. It's wish.com. And I don't know exactly what the story is there, but I think it's just it gets manufactured for cheap in China, and then they ship it over, on the slow boat. So it takes a while to get stuff, but you get stuff real cheap there. So I've gotten like camera lenses for my phone. I've gotten a handful of other things. I got a GoPro type camera for like $20. So anyway, it's just been interesting to kind of see how all of that fits together, and you can get stuff that you can actually use. I've been pretty happy with the quality of most of that stuff. She also got my birthday present on there, and that was an old Nintendo emulator. She got it for like $10, and it has pretty realistic Nintendo controllers and stuff. So anyway, all in all, I've been pretty happy with the stuff that I've gotten off of there. And like I said, it's like super cheap. So yeah, those are my picks. Ben, if people want to see what you're working on these days or follow you on Twitter or GitHub or anything like that, where do they go?
Yeah, the good place to find me is github.com/bcoe, just bco. And then on Twitter, what's my Twitter? My Twitter is just Benjamin Coe, all one word. So yeah, I'm pretty active on both places. So come say hi. And on the open source end of things, like I'm always looking for more contributors. So if you're interested if you've used Yargs before, if you've used Istanbul before, I'd love to have patches. So bug me on Twitter or GitHub.
Awesome. All right. Well, thank you for coming and talking to us. We'll go ahead and wrap this up, and we will catch everyone in a week. Bandwidth for this segment is provided by CacheFly, the world's fastest CDN. Deliver your content fast with CacheFly. Visit CACHEFLY.com to learn more.